make the trip. So we're now joined by Olin Buchanan, TexAgs.com, with Craig and Paul, David Smoak on 365 Sports. You know, Olin, I got to be honest with you. I saw that tweet with Jimbo and TCU and all that in the Fort Worth club, and it was like, oh, damn. It's the first time I've heard anything about A&M really in a long time, and I thought that might be a good thing.
I wasn't there, so I don't know the context. I don't know if he was asked the question. I don't think he said anything that wasn't true. TCU was an experienced team last year, and TCU did stay healthy, and they did do well. And then they got to the championship against an SEC team and got boat raced. Now, doesn't mean they would have gotten boat raced by every SEC team, but they did. So, but again, I wasn't there, so I don't know what the context was.
Yeah, I don't know what other than, right after we found out he was kidding, and like maybe it's just a joke that he's not in a spot to be able to tell without criticism right now. But
well, yeah, but wait a minute, and again, I wasn't there, but what if the question, or what if something came up with, hey, y'all were 5-7 last year, and you were going to compare yourself to TCU and say, well, you know what? The year before they were 5-7, went to the national championship game, and they stay. I don't know, but so I'm just not trying to run interference for anybody, but trying to look at all possible factors.
Olin, how do you think that he has started to at all turn the corner based on what you've seen after spring and the first wave of Bobby Petrino and all that?
Well, I don't know if he has. I'll say this. I thought his very first press conference of the spring, you may or may not have saw it. He garnered a lot of criticism nationally. I thought it was bizarre. I thought he came in there angry, or at least that's the way he struck me. And he resented. It seemed that he seemed to resent any questions about Bobby Petrino, or at least him losing or making changes in the offense. Said that scheme doesn't matter, which I don't know where that came from, but because it absolutely does. We all know that. And I think he took a step back and realized just how ludicrous some of the things he said and I think he took a step back and saw how he appeared. And I would say in every news conference after that, he was just a much different guy. He was more like the guy that we've gotten used to dealing with for the most part since he's been here. So I don't know if that means he turned a corner or not, or if he just regretted his the look he gave himself. But it absolutely was a bad look in that first press conference. But ever since then, he's been very cooperative.
Olin, I asked this because, it's one thing to talk to an A&M fan here or there, or read Twitter or something like that, but to get a real feel for the pulse of A&M right now, what is just sort of the feeling around their direction, around the changes they've made, coming off of the disappointment of last year? Is there still this abundant optimism because Jimbo Fisher's the head coach? Is there more doubt now that's implanted? How would you describe kind of the general overall feeling of A&M fans at the moment?
Cautious optimism. And it should be cautious. Now, I can understand why you're optimistic. You did have that tremendous recruiting class. And even with the guys that left, you still have a tremendous recruiting class. And you had, most of the talent last year. In fact, the vast majority was in the freshman and sophomore classes. Well, those guys are now juniors and sophomores. You had a ridiculous number of injuries. That happens sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. That's not an excuse, but it is. It was a contributing factor in the year they had. But, their offense was abysmal, and there's no way around it. And the only, or one of the few bright spots is now playing for the Miami Dolphins. So you can look at it and say, yeah, 10 starters are back on offense, but the best one isn't. But Bobby Petrino is coming in, and we keep hearing, and we didn't see it in the spring game, and I wouldn't expect it. We're hearing that they're using a lot more motion, pre-snap motion, a lot more deception, things that just A&M didn't do last year, which didn't make a lot of sense, to set up good one-on-one matchups. So you say, well, there's reasons to think that they're going to be pretty good, or that they could be good right away, much better. You like what you saw from Connor Wigman in the last month of the season at quarterback. Their group of receivers is going to be, I think, as good as anybody in the SEC with Anaya Smith coming back. You had a lot of injuries in the offensive line, and guys like Bryce Foster coming back healthy. So you look at those factors, you say, yeah, those are reasons to feel that they could be good. But I think to the point after last year, you have to say, yeah, don't tell us reasons, show us results. And of course, you're not going to see those results until 2 or 3 weeks into the season. I mean, you're not going to, if you go out and score 40 points against New Mexico, I don't think anybody's going to say, oh, wait, great, the offense is back and it's explosive now. So, yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Olin, has it been quiet, in your opinion, in some of the toxicity that is no longer a part of that program? Can you tell that, or can anyone within the program realize that some of these guys that needed to go are gone and it's better?
Well, I know that Bryce Anderson, who I think is going to be a star player here, he's going to be taking Antonio Johnson's place at nickelback, and I don't think there's going to be a huge decline at that position. He made a statement in a press conference saying, we had a lot of guys who were messed up in the head. And I think that was the direct quote. You can't always blame everything on that by any means, but a bad locker room, some bad elements can cause problems. And when you have 4 guys doing what they reportedly were doing at the South Carolina game in the locker room, that just makes you wonder what's going on. What are guys thinking? You had guys that got suspended because they snuck out of the hotel to go to a party. Now, some of those guys that did that came back and they did what they had to do to get back on the team. Some were back the next week, apologized, said it would never happen again, and moved forward, and have been model citizens ever since. So, but I think that's not something that's limited to A&M. I think almost every program can look at at least sometime in their program's history and say, we had some guys that was best to get them out.
Yeah, well, they probably just they were just recruiting so fast and heavy and hitting on everything. Sometimes you don't realize you might have hit the dumbass pipeline too. Right?
Well, yeah, I think they got a gusher in some places, and I do think that they have learned from that. And from what I understand, talking to recruiting people, that they've actually said, we're going to be a little bit more discriminate about the guys that we decide to recruit, and not just on talent. Want to make sure they feel like, I'm not saying they're all going to be choir boys by any means, but be a little more careful. If some guys think if there's some red flags, maybe you're going to take a closer look and decide whether or not you want to go, follow through on the recruitment.
Olin, this is a defense that's been pretty good. Do you think that they, that they lose the coordinator off to Duke and now Durbin for another year? Do you think that they will be able to reestablish what they were maybe here in year 2 of him? Durkin, I'm sorry.
Well, gosh, we'd hope that they were a lot better. You look at A&M defense, and it's perplexing because they only gave up about an average about 21 points, 22 points a game. And that's 25th in the nation or something like that. But you looked at, they were one of the worst run defenses in the country. Ole Miss ran for like 500 yards on them, maybe it's 400, but ran up and down the field on them. And they didn't have much of a pass rush, and they only got 4 interceptions the whole year, and yet they they held opponents to 22 points a game. So it's kind of bizarre. It just doesn't seem like it should add up. So I don't know if you can keep counting on it to work out that way for you. So I think they look at they need to be better, much better against the run, and need to get a pass rush, which typically isn't a problem around here. Now, they were forced to play in the defensive line much of the year with a whole bunch of freshmen, and it didn't matter that the talent. I mean, they're still freshmen going against grown men in the best conference in college football. So, the hope is that guys like Walter Nolan, who is like the number 1 recruit in the country as a defensive tackle, that he has slimmed down but gotten bigger, if that makes any sense. Some of the weight he had has been replaced by good weight. And they think that he looks quicker and expect him to be better. Shamar Stewart, guys like that. Gabriel Brownlow-Dendy, who didn't even get to play last year because he was hurt and had a red shirt. So there's a lot of hope that those guys are going to be a lot better as sophomores than they were as freshmen. And, they flashed as freshmen, but they look for consistent play. And quite frankly, I think we can all agree that that's not something that's out of the realm of possibility. See guys play better as sophomores than they did as freshmen.
Olin, how would you describe their approach to the portal this offseason and what they were or have been able to do? I know it's closed up now, but was highly aggressive, kind of more patient. How would you describe what they got in return compared to what they lost?
I think they were aggressive. I don't know if I call it highly aggressive, but they were aggressive. They needed a receiver. They went and got one, and then the guy decided maybe he didn't fit well here and went back to UTEP. Mm-hmm. But they needed some defensive backs, still do. They've got Tony Grimes out of North Carolina and Sam McCall out of Florida State, and they're really excited about both those guys. Got a linebacker from Jackson State. They need linebackers. And we can kind of shrug, oh, yeah, but you're getting a linebacker from, an FCS school, but a couple of years ago really worked out for LSU. Sometimes you find those really good players. So there's the hope that if their linebackers who are coming back as starters don't play at a higher level, then, maybe this guy will. So I think they looked at the issues they had. I think that they've already brought in another receiver too. Looked at the areas where they needed some depth, needed to be bolstered, and were really aggressive in trying to address those needs. They don't need a lot of starters. They definitely needed a starter at cornerback, and that's Tony Grimes. But again, with the amount of, I think it's 10 offensive and 8 defensive starters returning. With the amount of starters returning, they didn't need a whole bunch.
Right. But
they looked at where they needed depth and at some places where they needed starters, and were really aggressive in trying to fill those needs.
Olin, I know it's been such a long stretch of maybe, and the 2020 team was really good, and there's always that argument, and there's been some nice wins along the way. But how frustrating is it that as much as A&M has had some of those, wow, they beat Alabama, how frustrating is it that despite what looks like they're getting better, the 5-7, for whatever reason, that they still haven't been consistently really good?
Infinitely frustrating because now look, I think, the first year they improved. Okay, great. Everybody was happy with Jimbo. The next year, they took a step back, but if you look at their schedule that year, they played, I think the 5 losses were all the teams that finished 14th or higher, and they played 4 teams that were ranked number 1 when they played them. And this is after sending 10 guys into the NFL. And then in year 3, they broke out. They looked like, it was going to become the program that you expected. Well, then in year 4, Haynes King got hurt. We thought, okay, that's the reason they took the step back. They didn't have their starting quarterback. And then we find, well, maybe he wasn't that good after all because he really struggled last year. So now you're sitting there and you're looking at the first year, okay, you had an excuse maybe that we could buy. But the second year, you're starting to say, yeah, you had a lot of injuries, but you're supposed to be creating depth and those things. And by the way, I don't care how many injuries you have, there is no excuse for losing to Appalachian State. And that was in the second game. So the injuries hadn't mounted yet. So you just can't explain that away. So, yeah, I would think there's a lot of frustration. And that's why no matter how optimistic you are when you look at the roster and see talent up and down that roster, you're still only cautiously optimistic because of the frustration of the last 2 seasons. And I think you've gotten to a point now where you just don't, I think a lot of Aggies just don't necessarily believe that in Jimbo Fisher at the same level they did 2 years ago. I think now, they're taking the Missouri approach and say, don't tell me, show me. Until you show me, I'm going to be somewhat apprehensive.
Olin Buchanan, Texags.com with us on 365 Sports.
So Olin, they've been. We talked about Craig. They were active in the portal. Do you expect anything big moves down the line coming?
I mean, I think they're still looking for another. If they can get another receiver or another defensive back, they would take one. But at this point, I mean, I don't know who's the guy, who's the big name that would, just get everybody's attention if they got them that they're supposed to get or think they have a good chance to get. There's always somebody that I might know about that something going on, but I don't know. I don't think they're going to make any changes on the staff. I think the biggest news that's going to come up in the next few weeks is we're going to probably find out, what they're going to do with SEC scheduling moving forward. But as far as anything that A&M does, unless Jimbo makes a statement that everybody gloms onto nationally, I don't anticipate there being anything involving A&M that's going to be a major story. But one thing I know about college football, never say never.
Yeah, just wait. It's like the weather in Texas. Just wait a little bit; it'll change. Olin, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Have a great night. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Olin Buchanan, TexAgs.com on